Day 3 and another painting by Rubens, this time Descent from the Cross, painted in 1611 as an altarpiece for Antwerp Cathedral. You do have to be careful about analysing works that are taken out of their original context because their proportions could have changed, but in this case it conforms pretty well to a certain number of rules and principles. And this one, I think, has got a really big surprise that I've not seen anybody mention anywhere else, so I'm quite excited about that. I'm sure somebody else has noticed it, but I noticed it this morning and felt that I had to share it with you. And the surprise hinges on, why is the man who's on the ladder holding his elbow in that really uncomfortable manner? Yes, it's kind of echoing Jesus's right elbow, but it just seems a little bit odd, and I think I know why. The clue lies in this earlier painting by Holbein, Holbein's Ambassadors, also in the National Gallery. And you probably know that that abstract shape down the bottom there, which doesn't make much sense. When you look at it from above and from the side, which as I understand it would be as you were descending a staircase from where it was originally hung, you see this, which is a gravitas, meaning we're all going to die. It's a hidden skull. Now remember that this was painted as an altarpiece, therefore it would have been high up and people would have been looking up at it. So we're seeing it straight on here. Viewers would be looking up at it and therefore seeing at a slight angle. And I think that there's a hidden skull. Now, let me just turn up the contrast, and maybe you can see it now, because I could see it, and I've got to say now I can see it, I can't unsee it. So let me just pick that out where I think the skull is. I think it's here. It doesn't look exactly like a skull, it's not anatomically correct like Holbein's, but I think that's what it is, and especially with that strong piece of red, it's almost like an angry skull looking at the red, maybe the red of hell? Who knows? So here it is in perspective as you would be looking up at it, and you can see it a little bit clearer. Okay, I've got the blue lines on there, let me just take those off. Now you've got a kind of angry skull that's bearing down upon the red flames of that robe, and it becomes even more prominent when you look at it more as a thumbnail at that angle. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So I couldn't help but share that. I'm convinced that that was the intention. I don't think that has happened by accident. Anyway, let's get back to a more traditional analysis. So we have been talking about sinister diagonals going top left to bottom right, but this time we've got a Baroque diagonal going from bottom left to top right. And that's to show ascension, it's to show strength, progression, goodness if you like, which is exactly what Rubens would have wanted to portray for Christ. You can see the direction much more strongly when you reduce it to a notan, and isn't it interesting that the faces you can work out there are Christ and the Virgin Mary. If you remove the Virgin Mary from this composition, it shifts about and doesn't really feel as balanced, so having the Virgin Mary's face there slightly lighter gives that balance to the overall composition. And here you see the Baroque diagonal going from bottom left to top right is incredibly strong there. Something you can do with diagonals is strike 90 degrees off them to the opposite corner, and that's what I've done here. And you do see some things that are falling on those lines. So the man at the top, his arms are sort of aligned with it. It goes to another man that's on the ladder. And when you strike that same line down below, it goes to the two young girls at the bottom of the group of figures there. And I've got a feeling they were Rubens' daughters. Not too sure about that, but they do kind of look familiar. You can also strike across horizontals from those new intersections, and that gives you the centre of the canvas, and you've got very predominantly the Virgin Mary's face and upper body in that centre of the canvas, which is a very prominent position, of course. Let's consider where everybody's looking, and it comes as no surprise that nearly everybody is looking at Christ's face. However, if everybody was looking at Christ's face, you'd end up with the spokes on a wheel, and therefore, to move our eye around the canvas, you do have some figures that are looking elsewhere, and you've got this directional flow sort of going around if you follow the eye lines of all of the figures involved. It does seem to me that there's a very graceful S-curve that goes through this canvas, and I've just picked that out here. But it also starts us going into this circuitous route. It just seems to sort of rotate round, and for me it goes clockwise. Maybe for you it'd be anti-clockwise, but for me it seems to go clockwise and spins round where the main action is taking place. good old triangles, and you've got such a strong triangle being formed partly by the Baroque diagonal, but also by that ladder that's going up into the sky, and also the feet of the characters in the foreground. And that seems to be mirrored by another triangle that's on the other side of the Baroque diagonal. Internally, there are so many triangles going on between faces and arms and limbs, etc. That's roughly how I would map it out, but you might map it out slightly differently. It is forming the organic route of the group of figures as they take up their positions across the canvas. So there we have The Descent from the Cross by Rubens, painted in 1611. There'll be another painting tomorrow.